There is a moment in every conflict where a weapon appears that forces every military planner on the planet to stop what they are doing, look up from their doctrine manuals, and ask themselves a single, deeply uncomfortable question. Do we have an answer to that? The moment came for NATO in 1972, when intelligence reports began filtering into Western defense ministries about a new Soviet helicopter that did not fit any existing category. It was not a transport. It was not a gunship. It was both simultaneously wrapped in titanium armor, propelled by twin turboshaft engines that gave it a top speed no helicopter in the world could match, and armed with a weapons suite that could destroy armored vehicles, infantry formations, fortified positions, and enemy aircraft with equal methodical efficiency. Western analysts struggled to classify it. They called it the Hind. Soviet pilots had a simpler name for it. They called it the flying tank. The Mi-24 is the most combat-experienced attack helicopter in the history of warfare. That is not an opinion or an exaggeration. It is a statistical fact supported by 5 decades of continuous operational service across more than 50 countries on 4 continents. It has fired its weapons in anger in more conflicts than any other rotary-wing platform ever built, and it is still doing so right now, in 2026, on battlefields that its designers never anticipated when they first drew its lines on paper in 1968. No other helicopter in history has been asked to do what the Mi-24 has done. In the places it has done it, against the opponents it has faced, and across the span of time it has maintained its operational relevance. Understanding why requires understanding not just the machine itself, but the doctrine that created it, the man who conceived it, and the specific vision of warfare that made every design decision logical, rational, and ultimately proven correct by the harshest possible testing. Environment. Actual combat. Here is what this deep dive is going to show you. The Mi-24 is not simply a successful weapons system. It is the physical embodiment of a fundamentally different answer to the question of what rotary wing air power should do on a modern battlefield, an answer that no Western nation was willing to give because it contradicted their established doctrine, their procurement preferences, and their fundamental assumptions about how wars are won. And the extraordinary thing is that the Mi-24's answer has consistently been validated by experience in a way that its supposed Western superiors have not always been able to match. By the end of this, you will understand not just the helicopter, but the philosophy behind it, and why that philosophy still matters in 2026 more than most military analysts are willing to admit. To understand why the Mi-24 exists, you need to place yourself inside the mind of Mikhail Leontyevich Mil in the early 1960s, and you need to understand what he was watching from the Soviet side of the Iron Curtain. Mil was the head designer of the helicopter plant that bore his name, one of the Soviet Union's most respected aeronautical engineers, and a man with an almost obsessive conviction that the helicopter was going to transform ground warfare in ways that most of his contemporaries simply could not see yet. He was watching the Americans in Vietnam, and unlike many Soviet analysts who focused on the political dimensions of the conflict, Mil was focused on the tactical ones. He saw the RH-1 Huey being used in 2 completely separate roles that required completely separate aircraft configurations. Converted into gunships, they provided effective fire support but lost all transport capability. Used as troop carriers, they were dangerously vulnerable to ground fire with no meaningful protective armor. Every time a unit needed both fire support and transport simultaneously, it required 2 separate aircraft types working in coordination, which multiplied the logistical burden, the maintenance requirement, and the exposure to enemy fire. Mil's conceptual leap was deceptively simple and almost audaciously ambitious at the same time. Why not build one aircraft that could do both? Not sequentially, not with mission-specific configuration changes, but simultaneously. A helicopter that could suppress a landing zone with devastating firepower, deposit a combat-ready squad of infantry directly into the objective area, provide overwatch fire support during the assault, and then extract casualties under fire, while the gunship crew continued to engage threats from the same aircraft. In Soviet military doctrinal terms, this was the flying infantry fighting vehicle, the aerial equivalent of the BMP that could transport its own covering fire rather than depending on coordination with a separate element. It was a genuinely revolutionary concept, and like most revolutionary concepts, it faced substantial institutional resistance before it was approved. The development directive was officially issued on 6 May 1968, and work began under the internal codename Yellow 24. Mil's team at the Moscow helicopter plant prepared 2 initial concept designs, a lighter 7-ton single-engine configuration and a heavier 10-ton twin-engine configuration. Both were based on the Isotov TV3-1117 turboshaft engine, which was significantly more powerful than the TV2-1117 fitted to the existing Mi-8 transport helicopter. The military made its preference for the twin-engine design clear from the outset, partly for performance reasons and partly for the redundancy that two engines provided in a combat environment where single-engine failures could not be treated as acceptable operational risks. 3 full-scale mock-ups were constructed, along with 5 cockpit mock-ups that allowed the pilot and weapons system operator positions to be refined through repeated evaluation by actual pilots. The full-scale mock-up review was completed and approved in February 1969. The first tethered hover of the prototype took place on 15th of September 1969. 4 days later, on the 19th of September 1969, the Mi-24 conducted its first free flight. Mikhail Mil himself died in 1970, before his machine entered production, but his vision survived him entirely intact. The acceptance testing program that began in June 1970 and ran for 18 months identified and corrected a series of structural, vibration, and stability issues. The most significant aerodynamic modification was the introduction of a 12-degree anhedral angle to the stub wings to address the aircraft's tendency toward Dutch roll at speeds above 200 km per hour. The tail rotor was moved from the right to the left side of the tail boom, and its rotation direction was reversed so that it bit into the downwash of the main rotor rather than fighting it, increasing its effectiveness substantially. The Falunga anti-tank missile pylons were relocated from the fuselage sides to the wingtips for improved aerodynamic cleanliness. The production version, Mi-24A, achieved initial operating capability in 1971 and was officially accepted into the Soviet state arsenal on the 24th of September 1972. The flying tank was operational, and within 6 years, it would be firing its weapons in actual combat for the first time on the plains of Africa, beginning a combat record that would span 5 decades and rewrite the textbooks of rotary wing warfare. Standing beneath a Mi-24 on a flight line, the first thing that strikes you is the sheer scale of the machine. This is not a nimble, lightweight attack platform designed for minimal radar and visual signature. It is a declaration of intent in metal and composite, a machine that announces its presence and its capability without apology. Every dimension communicates aggression, and every number in its specification sheet reflects the uncompromising philosophy of its designers. The Mi-24's fuselage length, measured from nose to tail without the rotor blades, is 17.5 meters, making it one of the longest helicopters in operational service anywhere in the world. With the main rotor turning, the total length from the nose to the tip of the furthest rotor blade is 21.6 meters. The wingspan of the mid-mounted stub wings, which serve both as weapons hardpoint carriers and as aerodynamic lifting surfaces generating up to a quarter of total lift at high forward speeds, is 6.5 meters. The rotor head height from ground level is 3.9 meters, while the height to the tip of the tail rotor is 6.5 meters when the aircraft is on the ground. The main rotor diameter is 17.3 meters, swept by 5 titanium and fiberglass blades, and the tail rotor diameter is 3.9 meters. The total disc area of the main rotor is approximately 235 square meters. Empty weight equals 8,500 kilograms, maximum takeoff weight equals 12,000 kilograms, useful load equals 3,500 kilograms. The standard empty weight of the Mi-24 is 8,500 kilograms, or approximately 18,740 pounds. The maximum takeoff weight is 12,000 kilograms, with some later variants certified to 12,500 kilograms. This means the aircraft can carry approximately 3,500 kilograms of useful load distributed across fuel, weapons, crew, and passengers, a figure that gives the mission planner meaningful flexibility but also creates genuine operational trade-offs in hot and high conditions where atmospheric density reduces available engine power. The power plant consists of 2 Isotov TV3-1117 turboshaft engines mounted in an inline tandem configuration above the fuselage, sharing a combined exhaust outlet on each side. Each engine produces 2,200 shaft horsepower at maximum continuous power rating, giving a combined output of 4,400 shaft horsepower. This extraordinary power-to-weight ratio is the direct source of the Mi-24's most immediately impressive performance characteristic, its speed. The maximum level flight speed of the Mi-24 is 335 km per hour, making it the fastest production attack helicopter in the world. Its cruise speed for normal combat operations is approximately 270 km per hour. The service ceiling is 4,500 meters, with a hover ceiling and ground effect of 2,200 meters. The static thrust ceiling out of ground effect is approximately 1,500 meters, a limitation that became operationally significant during operations in the high-altitude terrain of Afghanistan. The operational range of the Mi-24 on internal fuel only is 450 kilometers, extending to 1,000 kilometers when external fuel tanks are carried on the wing hardpoints in place of weapons. The rate of climb from sea level under standard conditions is approximately 750 meters per minute, sufficiently aggressive to allow rapid repositioning between attack runs or to escape from engagement envelopes where the aircraft is vulnerable. On 21 September 1978, a specially modified Mi-24 variant, designated the A-10, stripped of its stub wings and non-essential systems to reduce weight to the absolute minimum, set the absolute world speed record for helicopters at 368.4 kilometers per hour over a 15-kilometer course. That record stood for 8 years until a modified British Westland Lynx broke it in 1986. The achievement demonstrated the aerodynamic quality of the basic Mi-24 airframe when freed from the operational constraints of combat equipment, and it established beyond any reasonable dispute that no comparable helicopter in any NATO inventory could match the Hind in outright speed. The crew arrangement of the production Mi-24D and all subsequent variants uses a tandem-stepped cockpit configuration with 2 separate bubble canopies. The weapons systems operator sits in the forward position with primary control over the nose turret, missiles and rockets. The pilot occupies the elevated rear position with a higher sightline that preserves adequate forward visibility while flying in formation or during terrain following approaches. Both crew stations are enclosed in titanium armor tubs that provide protection against 12.7mm rounds from all directions. The armored windscreen panels are ballistic-resistant glass that withstands 7.62mm fire. The rotor blades themselves are manufactured from a titanium spar with fiberglass construction and are certified to sustain hits from 12.7mm rounds without loss of structural integrity, sufficient to prevent continued flight. A Mi-24 can absorb dozens of hits from heavy machine gun fire in non-critical areas and continue to fly and fight, a survivability characteristic that no contemporary Western attack helicopter could match. The NBC protection suite, reflecting the Soviet priority of battlefield nuclear and chemical survival, consists of an overpressure system for both the cockpit compartment and the troop cabin that maintains positive pressure to prevent contaminated external air from entering. The cockpit filtration system provides individual crew protection against biological and chemical agents. This capability made the Mi-24 the only attack helicopter in the world fully certified for combat operations immediately after a tactical nuclear detonation, in an environment saturated with fallout, chemical agents, or biological contamination. The weapons philosophy of the Mi-24 is built around a single principle that sets it apart from every dedicated attack helicopter ever produced. It needs to be capable of engaging every category of target it is likely to encounter on a modern battlefield with organic weapons, without depending on coordination with other aircraft types or ground-based fire support. Tanks, infantry, fortifications, helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, and even light naval vessels all fall within its designed engagement envelope, and the variety of weapons it can carry reflects that ambition with impressive comprehensiveness. The primary fixed armament of the most widely produced variants is the Yak-B 12.7 4-barrel rotary machine gun mounted in the USPU-24 nose turret. This system fires the heavy 12.7 by 108mm cartridge at a cyclic rate of up to 4,000 rounds per minute, with a muzzle velocity of 860 meters per second. The turret traverses 60 degrees left and right of centerline in azimuth and elevates 20 degrees up and depresses 40 degrees down, giving the weapons system operator a wide field of engagement without requiring the pilot to align the aircraft precisely with the target. The ammunition capacity is 1,470 rounds, providing approximately 22 seconds of continuous fire at maximum cyclic rate, or considerably longer engagement duration at reduced rates. Against infantry in the open light vehicles, crew-served weapons positions, and soft-skinned targets, the Yak-B 12.7 is devastatingly effective at ranges up to 1,800 meters with reasonable accuracy. The Mi-24P variant, which entered production alongside the Mi-24V, replaced the traversable turret with a fixed GSH-32 twin-barrel 30mm cannon mounted rigidly to the starboard side of the fuselage. This weapon fires at 2,000 to 3,000 rounds per minute with a muzzle velocity of 870 meters per second, producing devastating fragmentation and penetration effects against light armor, crew-served weapons, and field fortifications at ranges up to 4,000 meters. The trade-off is the loss of angular flexibility. Engaging off-axis targets requires the pilot to maneuver the entire aircraft rather than traversing the turret, which increases the aircraft's exposure time in the threat envelope. The Mi-24 VP variant found a compromise by fitting the GS-23L twin-barrel 23mm cannon in a movable mount that partially restored the angular engagement capability while maintaining significantly greater destructive power than the 12.7mm gun. The 6 external hardpoints on the stub wings can carry a combination of weapons from an extensive catalogue depending on the mission type, for area suppression and anti-infantry operations. The primary loadout consists of B-8V-20A rocket pods, each containing 20-80mm S-8 unguided rockets, with up to 4 pods giving a total salvo of 80 rockets. The S-8-8 variants available include the S-8KO with a shaped charge warhead for light armor, the S-8-8 TZEM thermobaric warhead for enclosed spaces and fortifications, and the S-8OFP fragmentation warhead for personnel and soft targets. For harder targets, UB-3257 pods carrying 32-57mm S-5 rockets were widely used in earlier service, though the heavier S-8 proved significantly more effective in Afghanistan and replaced the S-5 as the primary unguided weapon in most operational units. For extreme point targets, the S-24 240mm unguided heavy rocket can be carried, delivering a warhead with explosive effect comparable to a 250kg bomb against fortifications, bridge abutments, and reinforced structures. The precision anti-armor capability of the Mi-24 evolved significantly through its service life. Initial variants carried the 3 M11 Phalanga radio-guided wire-command anti-tank missile, capable of defeating 500mm of rolled homogeneous armor at ranges up to 4,000 meters. The decisive upgrade came with the Mi-24 Wild and the integration of the 9K114 Sturm, NATO designation @6 Spiral, a semi-automatic radio-guided missile with a maximum range of 5,000 meters and warhead penetration of 560 to 700mm of homogeneous steel, depending on variant. 4 Sturm missiles could be carried simultaneously, providing a robust anti-armor capability against all tank types in service during the 1970s and 1980s. Later Mi-35M variants integrated the 9 M120 Ataka missile system, with a tandem heat warhead capable of defeating 800mm of armor behind explosive reactive armor packages, extending the platform's relevance against current and near-future armored vehicles. For air-to-air self-defense, the outer hardpoints can carry RS-60 infrared-guided short-range air-to-air missiles with a maximum effective range of 8,000 meters and a minimum engagement range of 200 meters, or the more capable RS-73 all-aspect missile on modernized variants. The maximum external weapons load of the Mi-24 is 1,500 kilograms, and the aircraft can also carry up to 1,000-kilogram iron bombs, 4 250-kilogram bombs, or 2 500-kilogram bombs for deliberate strikes against fixed targets. The ability to carry iron bombs of this caliber makes the Mi-24 the only attack helicopter in the world capable of delivering medium-weight unguided ordnance directly against hardened targets, a capability that proved valuable in Afghanistan for destroying cave complexes and fortified village strongpoints that rockets could damage but not destroy. The fire control and targeting systems of the Mi-24 series evolved from relatively basic optical sighting equipment in the early variants to sophisticated electro-optical systems in the most modern Mi-35M. The baseline Mi-24D used the USPU-24 sight for the nose turret and a gyro-stabilized sight for the Phalanga missiles. The Mi-24V improved this with the Raduga sight for the Sturm missile system. Modern Mi-35M variants are equipped with the UOMZ GOES 342 gyro-stabilized sensor turret, which integrates a forward-looking infrared imager, a Sony daylight television camera, a laser rangefinder, and a laser designator in a single spherical housing mounted under the nose. This system enables target detection, identification, and engagement at night and in degraded visibility conditions, addressing one of the most serious operational limitations of the original Mi-24 family. The GOES 342 also provides target coordinates to the helicopter's navigation system for precise weapon delivery outside the direct line of sight. The Mi-24 family is one of the most extensively ramified helicopter lineages in the history of military aviation, with variants ranging from incremental improvements to comprehensive rebuilds that share little beyond the basic airframe architecture with the 1972 production original. The Mi-24A, the first production variant from 1970, is immediately distinguishable by its large greenhouse-style canopy accommodating the pilot and co-pilot gunner side by side in an arrangement borrowed from the Mi-8 transport helicopter. The forward-facing 12.7mm fixed gun and wingtip Falanga missile pylons gave it a basic anti-armor capability, but the side-by-side cockpit arrangement provided poor ballistic protection and limited the weapon's operator's field of view. Approximately 240 were produced before the definitive tandem cockpit configuration replaced it. The Mi-24B was a limited production development that tested the nose turret configuration while retaining aspects of the Mi-24A airframe. It was not produced in significant numbers, but provided critical data for the definitive variant. The Mi-24D, designated Hind D by NATO and entering Soviet service in 1976, is the helicopter that defined the Hind's visual identity for the world. The tandem stepped bubble cockpit arrangement, the distinctive double bubble canopy silhouette, the chin-mounted USP U-24 turret with the 4-barrel Yak-B 12.7 machine gun, and the undernose sensor package all appeared together for the first time in the Mi-24D. This variant was produced in substantial numbers and exported widely under the Mi-25 designation to Soviet client states. The Mi-24 Vought, NATO Hind E, represents the most numerically significant production variant of the entire family. Entering service in 1977, it replaced the Falanga anti-tank missiles with the dramatically more capable Sturm system, whose range advantage and improved accuracy made it genuinely effective against modern armor at combat distances where the launching aircraft was outside the engagement envelope of most ground-based air defense systems. The Mi-24V was produced in larger numbers than any other variant and formed the backbone of Soviet air assault regiments through the 1980s and into the 1990s. The Mi-24P, NATO Hind F, substituted the fixed GSH-32 cannon for the turret gun to provide greater destructive power against lightly armored vehicles and crew-served weapons. The Mi-24VP restored some of the angular engagement flexibility with the movable GSH-23L cannon installation. The Mi-24 RKHR is one of the most unusual members of the family, a specialized chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear reconnaissance variant equipped with sensors to sample contaminated air and soil, providing battlefield commanders with real-time data about the extent and type of NBC contamination. A small number of these specialized aircraft served in Ukrainian inventory and are documented as still flying combat missions in the current conflict, collecting radiological data over areas of military operations. The Mi-35M, the current production variant produced by the Rostvertol plant, represents the most comprehensive modernization of the basic design. It features a shortened, non-retractable undercarriage that simplifies maintenance and reduces weight, a redesigned 4-blade rotor derived from the Mi-28 that reduces noise and vibration while improving high-altitude performance, and the full GOES 342 sensor suite enabling true night and all-weather operations. The Mi-35M also features a significantly strengthened airframe, modern digital avionics, and compatibility with the latest generation of Ataka missiles and R-73 air-to-air weapons. The export denomination system separated the Mi-24 into Mi-25 and Mi-35 designations for international customers, with the suffix letters indicating specific variant configurations. The South African firm ATE developed the Super Hind upgrade package, which fitted Western avionics, including a sophisticated helmet-mounted sight, a modern fire control computer, and improved navigation systems to Mi-24 airframes operated by South African and other African customers, demonstrating that the basic platform remained viable with Western technology integration. The operational history of the Mi-24 is not a theoretical exercise in performance specifications. It is a record written in 50 years of actual combat, on actual battlefields, against actual enemies who were doing everything in their power to destroy it. That record is both the most compelling evidence of the Hind's genuine capability and the most honest accounting of its real limitations. The Mi-24's combat debut came not in Afghanistan, as is commonly assumed, but in the Horn of Africa in 1977 and 1978 during the Ogaden War between Ethiopia and Somalia. When the Soviet Union switched its strategic support from Somalia to Ethiopia in late 1977, it organized one of the largest military airlifts in Cold War history, delivering tanks, artillery, and a contingent of Cuban-piloted Mi-24 helicopters to the Ethiopian forces. The combined Ethiopian-Cuban counteroffensive that began in early 1978 drove Somali forces entirely out of the Ogaden by March of that year. The Mi-24s played a direct and decisive role in the combined air-ground assault, operating exactly as Soviet doctrine intended, suppressing defensive positions with rockets and gunfire to allow ground forces to advance. providing persistent overwatch that Soviet fixed-wing attack aircraft could not sustain, and demonstrating to every military observer on the continent that this helicopter was in a fundamentally different class from anything previously seen in African warfare. The Chadian-Libyan conflict provided the next significant operational test, as Libyan forces equipped with Mi-24A and Mi-25 variants intervened repeatedly in Chad's civil war through the late 1970s and 1980s. At the Battle of N'Djamena in October 1980, Libyan Mi-24s provided the decisive fire support that allowed the allied Chadian People's Armed Forces to seize the capital. The helicopters demonstrated their ability to operate effectively in the harsh environmental conditions of the Sahel, where heat, dust, and limited maintenance infrastructure severely tested the reliability of rotary wing equipment. The Mi-24's robust engineering handled these conditions with reasonable success. But the conflict that truly defined the Mi-24's reputation, both its extraordinary effectiveness and its significant vulnerabilities, was the Soviet-Afghan War from 1979 to 1989. When Soviet forces crossed into Afghanistan in December 1979, the Mi-24 was their primary airborne strike asset, and in the initial phase of the war it performed with a lethality that the Mujahideen had no adequate response to. The combination of titanium armor, high speed and heavy weapons made it effectively invulnerable to small arms fire and difficult to engage effectively with RPGs, which required angles and distances that exposed the shooter to immediate return fire. Soviet and Afghan government Mi-24 crews conducted hunter-killer sweeps in pairs or groups of 4, using terrain masking to appear suddenly over ridge lines and engage guerrilla positions before dispersing to the safety of speed and altitude. The rebels called the Mi-24 Satan's Chariot, not because they feared its technology, but because it seemed to arrive without warning, withstand their fire, and kill without apparent mercy before disappearing just as suddenly. One documented incident describes an Mi-24 pilot who had expended all his ammunition using the aircraft itself as a psychological weapon, making repeated low-aggressive passes toward a Mujahideen position to hold the fighters in place until friendly ground forces could arrive. The rebels unwilling to advance against what they believed was still a fully armed and dangerous machine. The favored weapons load in Afghanistan evolved through combat experience. The S-880mm rocket proved far more effective than the lighter S-5 57mm round against the stone construction of Afghan villages and mountain fortifications. Iron bombs of up to 500 kilograms were used against cave complexes and fortified positions that rockets could not destroy. The Sturm anti-tank missile was initially underused because the Mujahideen had few armored vehicles, but became more valuable later in the war as the rebels began using heavier weapons and captured armor. The critical vulnerability that the war exposed was the thermal signature generated by the Mi-24's inline engine configuration. The engines mounted side by side above the fuselage exhausted their gases in concentrated streams that created large infrared and ultraviolet radiation sources clearly visible to modern heat-seeking missiles. When the CIA began supplying the Mujahideen with IM-92 Stinger missiles in 1986, this design characteristic became operationally catastrophic. Unlike the earlier SA-7 and Red-Eye missiles that could only attack from the rear and were relatively susceptible to flare countermeasures, the Stinger could engage from any aspect, could lock onto both infrared and ultraviolet emissions simultaneously, and was significantly more resistant to flares. Soviet sources acknowledged the loss of 74 helicopters in Afghanistan, with 27 specifically attributed to Stinger hits. The response was tactically intelligent. Crews adopted nap of the earth flying profiles at altitudes below 60 meters, heat signature reduction kits were fitted to the exhaust outlets, missile warning systems and improved flare dispensers were installed, and crews were trained to execute immediate brake turns upon missile warning. These measures reduced losses, but could not eliminate them. The Stinger had changed the operational calculus permanently, and the Mill Design Bureau explicitly redesigned the engine arrangement in the Mi-28 successor to spread exhaust heat into the rotor downwash and reduce the thermal signature that had made the Mi-24 so vulnerable. The Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988 produced the most historically unique combat chapter in the Mi-24's operational record, and one of the most remarkable episodes in the history of military aviation. For the first and only time in the history of warfare, sustained confirmed air-to-air combat between opposing attack helicopter forces occurred, with Iraqi Mi-25 units fighting against Iranian R-1JC Cobras in engagements that provide the only real-world data on helicopter versus helicopter combat performance. The initial exchanges in November 1980 went badly for the Mi-25. Two Iraqi Mi-25s were engaged by Iranian Sea Cobras using BGM-71 tow wire-guided anti-tank missiles in the air-to-air role. One Mi-25 was destroyed immediately. The second was so severely damaged that it crashed before reaching its base. On 24th of April 1981, the Iranians repeated the achievement, destroying two more Mi-25s without loss. The heavier, less maneuverable Mi-25 proved disadvantaged against the lighter, more agile Sea Cobra in these initial engagements. The Iraqis adapted. With advice from East German military advisors, they developed new tactics that exploited the Mi-25's advantages in firepower and protection. On 14 September 1983, an Iraqi Mi-25 destroyed an Iranian Sea Cobra using its Yak B-12.7 rotary cannon in a direct gun engagement. On 5 February 1984, Iraqi Mi-25s claimed three more Sea Cobras, and on 25 February 1984, three additional Sea Cobras were destroyed, two with Phalange missiles and one with S-5 rockets. Perhaps most remarkably, a 1982 report documented an Iraqi Mi-24D destroying an Iranian F-4E Phantom II jet fighter using either its cannon or anti-tank missiles in a head-on engagement, one of the very few confirmed instances of a helicopter defeating a fast jet in combat. The final balance of the helicopter air-to-air war was roughly even in kills, but the tactical evolution demonstrated by the Iraqi Mi-25 crews in learning to exploit their aircraft's strengths after initial defeats showed the adaptability of the platform when operated by crews, with sufficient training and tactical intelligence. The Battle of Quito Cuanavale in Angola from August 1987 to March 1988, the largest armored engagement in Africa since the Second World War, saw Mi-24s operated by Cuban and Angolan forces playing a significant role in blocking and ultimately turning back the South African Defense Forces armored offensive. The SADF's initial advances in the Lomba River sector were contested by combined air and armor operations in which Mi-24 helicopter gunships contributed materially to halting the South African ground advance. The helicopters operated in an environment contested by South African air defense systems and Mirage F-1 fighter bombers, which imposed significant operational constraints, but their contributions to the defensive battle at Quito Cuanavale were acknowledged by commanders on both sides as an important factor in the eventual outcome. In Syria, from 2015 onward, Russian Mi-24Ps operating from Khmeimim Air Base conducted patrol and escort missions alongside more modern Ka-52 and Mi-28N helicopters. Their role in the Syrian campaign was more limited than in previous conflicts, reflecting both the availability of more capable alternatives and the evolving threat environment of a war with significant portable air defense capabilities, but their continued deployment demonstrated Moscow's confidence in the platform's operational utility, even against relatively sophisticated opposition. The war in Ukraine that escalated to full-scale invasion in February 2022 has seen both Russian and Ukrainian Mi-24 variants operating in combat, producing some of the most direct evidence about the helicopter's performance in modern high-intensity warfare. Both sides have suffered significant losses, with Russian Mi-24 35 losses reported at 18 or more confirmed destroyed in Ukrainian service, and Ukrainian forces destroying comparable numbers of Russian examples. The war has confirmed the assessment that the Mi-24's large size and relatively high thermal signature make it acutely vulnerable to modern man-portable air defense systems, particularly when operating without adequate suppression of enemy air defense, and that the nap of the earth tactics developed in Afghanistan remain the correct operational approach, but can only partially mitigate the inherent vulnerability. The comparison between the Mi-24 and its Western contemporaries and successors is one of the most instructive exercises in military aviation analysis, because the differences between them reflect not just different engineering solutions, but fundamentally different answers to the question of what an attack helicopter should be and what battlefield problem it should solve. The American RH-64 Apache is the comparison that appears most frequently in any discussion of the Mi-24, and it is simultaneously the most illuminating and the most misleading. It is illuminating because the two aircraft represent the clearest possible expression of opposing design philosophies. It is misleading because the AH-64 entered service 14 years after the Mi-24, which means comparing them as contemporaries is inherently unfair to the earlier design. With that caveat established clearly, the comparison remains useful precisely because the Apache was explicitly designed to solve the same battlefield problem that the Mi-24 addressed, using entirely different means. The AH-64A Apache weighs approximately 8,000 kilograms empty, 500 kilograms lighter than the Mi-24, and has a maximum takeoff weight of 9,525 kilograms, more than 2,400 kilograms lighter than the Mi-24's maximum. This weight advantage translates directly into better maneuverability, a lower thermal signature, and significantly reduced vulnerability to ground fire simply through presenting a smaller target. The Apache's maximum speed is 293 km per hour, approximately 40 km per hour slower than the Mi-24, a meaningful difference in a combat environment where speed is a primary survivability tool. The Apache carries no troops and has no transport capability whatsoever. Its fire control system, centered on the AN/APG-78 longbow millimeter-wave fire control radar mounted above the rotor mast, gives it the ability to detect, classify, and prioritize up to 256 targets simultaneously and engage them with Hellfire missiles from masked positions, where the aircraft remains invisible to direct observation. This standoff engagement capability is fundamentally superior to the Mi-24's requirement to expose itself to engage most of its weapons. The Apache's unit cost in the AH-64E Guardian configuration is approximately $35 to $40 million per aircraft. An Mi-35M new production costs approximately $12 to $15 million. For a military force that needs to field meaningful numbers of capable attack helicopters within a realistic defense budget, that 3-to-1 cost differential is not a footnote, it is the entire calculation. 3 Mi-35M helicopters for the price of one R-64E Guardian means 3 aircraft available for simultaneous operations, 3 crews accumulating flight hours, 3 platforms able to absorb combat attrition before operational effectiveness is degraded. For the specific operational scenarios and threat environments facing the majority of the world's military forces, the Mi-35M's combination of sufficient performance, genuine combat-proven reliability, comprehensive weapons versatility, and dramatically lower acquisition cost represents a genuinely rational choice rather than a compromise driven by budget constraints. The American AH-1Z Viper, the most advanced version of the Cobra lineage that traded shots with the Mi-25 in the Iran-Iraq War, is a significantly more capable aircraft than its 1980s predecessor, with a maximum speed of 321 km per hour, a modern digital fire control system, compatibility with AIM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles, and a unit cost of approximately $30 million. It sits between the Apache and the Mi-24 in most performance and cost parameters. Its twin-engine configuration and relatively compact size give it better hot and high performance than the heavier Mi-24, while its lack of troop transport capability and lower weapons payload compared to the Hind reflect the specialized attack helicopter philosophy that American design consistently favored over the Soviet combined arms approach. The Eurocopter Tiger ARH, developed jointly by France and Germany and introduced in the 2000s, represents the European answer to the attack helicopter requirement. At approximately 36 to 40 million euros per unit, it is comparable in cost to the Apache and significantly more expensive than the Mi-35M. Its smaller size, around 6,000 kilograms empty weight, gives it excellent maneuverability and a low signature compared to the Mi-24, and its modern avionics suite is genuinely sophisticated. But against the Mi-24, the Tiger shares the fundamental limitation of all-purpose designed Western attack helicopters. It cannot transport infantry. In the operational scenarios for which the Mi-24 was designed, where the helicopter must simultaneously provide fire support and deliver or extract troops, the Tiger is simply not in the same category of capability, regardless of its individual performance specifications. The Russian Kar-52 Alligator and Mi-28N Night Hunter represent the current Russian answer to the attack helicopter question, and both were explicitly designed to address the Mi-24's most serious limitations: the inline engine thermal signature vulnerability, the limited night and all-weather capability of early variants, and the lack of a modern fire control radar. The Ka-52's coaxial rotor design gives it exceptional agility and hover stability. The Mi-28N's MIL-N025 fire control radar provides a standoff engagement capability broadly comparable to the Apache's longbow system. Both aircraft represent genuine generational advances over the Mi-24 in specific capabilities, but neither can transport troops, neither has the Mi-24's operational range, and neither is available in quantities approaching the 2,648 units of the Hind family that currently serve in more than 50 countries. The Mi-24's installed base, the existing infrastructure of trained crews, maintenance technicians, spare parts, and operational doctrine built around it across 5 decades of service in dozens of countries, is itself a strategic asset that its successors will take generations to replicate. An honest assessment of the Mi-24's strengths requires separating what it does genuinely well from the mythology that has accumulated around it through 5 decades of combat service and Cold War cultural significance. There are several areas where the Hind's advantages are real, substantial, and not fully replicated by any other rotary wing platform in current service. The first and most fundamental is speed. 335 kilometers per hour in level flight is not just a performance record, it is a survivability multiplier. An Mi-24 closing on a target position is spending less time in the engagement envelope of any man-portable air defense system than any other attack helicopter in the world. An Mi-24 departing a target area is building separation from threat systems faster than any alternative. In environments where short-range infrared missiles represent the primary air defense threat, as they have in every conflict the Mi-24 has fought in from Afghanistan to Ukraine, speed is the most effective single countermeasure available, and no helicopter provides more of it. The second critical strength is combat damage tolerance. The titanium rotor blades, the armored crew tubs, the ballistic windscreens, the redundant flight control pathways, and the sheer structural robustness of an airframe designed without apology for the assumption that it would be shot at regularly in combat combine to give the Mi-24 a survivability margin against small arms and light automatic weapons fire that is genuinely extraordinary. Documented cases of Mi-24s returning to base with dozens of bullet holes in non-critical areas of the fuselage are not exceptional events in the aircraft's operational history. They are routine. The psychological effect on crews flying an aircraft they know can absorb this level of punishment without becoming unflyable is a force multiplier that no specification sheet can quantify. The third strength is weapons versatility. No other helicopter in the world can carry unguided rockets, precision anti-tank guided missiles, air-to-air missiles, gunfire from multiple calibers, and iron bombs of up to 500 kilograms, all on the same airframe with the appropriate mix selected by the mission planner based on the specific targets expected. This flexibility makes the Mi-24 the ideal single-platform solution for armies that cannot afford the luxury of maintaining separate aircraft types optimized for different subcategories of air-to-ground attack. The fourth strength is operational economics. At $12 to $15 million for a new Mi-35M and significantly less for refurbished Mi-24 VEAL and Mi-24P airframes available through the international defense market, the Mi-24 family provides capable attack helicopter power at a fraction of the acquisition cost of Western alternatives. The operational and maintenance costs follow a similar pattern, with the robust mechanical simplicity of the TV3LO17 engine family, and the straightforward hydraulic and mechanical systems translating into lower maintenance man-hours per flight hour than more sophisticated competitors. For the majority of the world's armed forces operating under realistic budget constraints, this economic calculus is not secondary to performance. It is the primary factor determining what can actually be fielded in meaningful numbers. The fifth and most unique strength is the troop transport capability. No other dedicated attack helicopter in the world can carry 8 combat-equipped soldiers in an armored cabin while simultaneously providing its own fire suppression from a full weapons loadout. This capability transforms the operational art of air assault by collapsing the distinction between the fire support element and the lift element of a helicopter assault into a single coordinated machine. The efficiency gains in planning, coordination, and execution are difficult to quantify precisely, but are unmistakable in the operational records of every force that has employed the Mi-24 in this combined role. The Mi-24's operational limitations are as well documented as its strengths, and an honest understanding of both is necessary for a complete picture of the platform. The weapon systems that defeated it in Afghanistan provide the clearest possible evidence of where its design compromises created exploitable vulnerabilities. The most serious structural weakness is the inline engine configuration's thermal signature. Mounting both TV31117 engines side by side above the fuselage with their exhausts exiting through concentrated outlets on each side creates 2 large, clearly defined sources of infrared and ultraviolet radiation that are not dispersed by the rotor downwash the way they would be if the engines were positioned in nacelles on either side of the fuselage, as in most Western helicopter designs. The FIM-92 Stinger's ability to discriminate these twin heat sources from background clutter and track them through evasive maneuvers and flare dispensing proved to be the Mi-24's most dangerous operational limitation in the high-altitude, clear air environment of Afghanistan. The subsequent design of the Mi-28 explicitly corrected this by placing the engines in separate lateral nacelles, whose exhaust is dispersed into the main rotor downwash, confirming that Soviet designers fully understood the vulnerability and considered it serious enough to drive, a fundamental architectural change in the successor platform. The second significant limitation is maneuverability at low speeds. The Mi-24's aerodynamics are optimized for high-speed flight, and the stub wings that provide meaningful lift above 200 km per hour become aerodynamic liabilities at low speed and in the hover, increasing the power required to maintain position and reducing the margin available for aggressive maneuvering. In combat environments that require extended low-speed operation, such as close support of dismounted infantry in complex terrain, the Mi-24 is less capable than lighter dedicated attack helicopters, whose designs are not constrained by the need to generate aerodynamic lift at high speed. The third limitation is sensor capability in the baseline configurations. The original Mi-24 series had no genuine night vision or thermal imaging capability, meaning that after dark or in conditions of reduced visibility, the crew was essentially operating blind relative to a modern helicopter equipped with forward-looking infrared systems. The GOES 342 system on the Mi-35M addressed this comprehensively, but the majority of Mi-24 airframes currently in service around the world remain equipped with significantly less capable sensors than their Western contemporaries, creating a genuine operational disadvantage in any engagement where night or bad weather operations are expected. The fourth limitation is vulnerability to modern sophisticated air defense systems. The Mi-24 was designed to operate in environments where the primary air defense threat was short-range infrared missiles and automatic cannon. Against longer-range radar-guided surface-to-air missile systems, or against modern fighters equipped with beyond-visual-range missiles, the Mi-24 has no meaningful survivability advantage over any other helicopter. Its speed and armor are irrelevant against a radar-guided missile, traveling at multiple times its maximum velocity. In the current operational environment, where even non-state actors can acquire relatively sophisticated air defense equipment, this limitation represents a genuine constraint on the Mi-24's operational employment that commanders must plan around carefully. The Mi-24 was produced at the Arseniev Aviation Company and the Rostvertol plant from 1969 onward, with total production across all variants exceeding 2,648 confirmed units, according to the most authoritative sources. The Soviet Union itself operated the largest fleet, with approximately 1,420 Mi-24s in service with the Soviet Army by the end of 1990. Production in the Soviet Union continued through the 1980s, transitioning to Russian production after 1991, with continued manufacture of the Mi-35M under the Rostvertol plant in Rostov-on-Don, which remains in production today. Total production, all variants, approximately 2,648 units operators, equals 52 countries. The export price structure varied substantially by era, political alignment, and package contents. During the Soviet period, export pricing was frequently subsidized as part of military assistance packages to aligned states, with actual cash transfer prices often significantly below production cost. Post-Soviet Russian export pricing for new Mi-35M helicopters is approximately $12 to $15 million per aircraft in basic configuration, rising to $18 to $20 million for fully equipped packages with training, logistics support, and initial spare parts reserves. The secondary market for refurbished Mi-24 Velt and Mi-24P airframes ranges from approximately $2 million for high-hour examples, requiring significant maintenance, to $8 million for recently overhauled aircraft with documented airframe hours and certified component. Serviceability. Current operators span every continent except Antarctica and include Russia, Ukraine, India, Venezuela, Peru, Nigeria, Algeria, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Afghanistan, Angola, Cuba, Ethiopia, Iraq, Mozambique, Nicaragua, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and more than 30 additional nations. The geographical breadth of this operator network reflects both the universal utility of the platform and the extraordinary value proposition it has represented at every price point across its 5 decades of production. The story of the Su-15 that this channel examined previously was ultimately a story about what happens when a technically excellent machine is embedded in a system whose doctrine cannot accommodate error or ambiguity. The story of the T-55 was about how sheer numbers and mechanical simplicity can outlast technological sophistication in the real world of operational constraints. The story of the Mi-24 is something different from either. It is the story of what happens when a genuinely original idea, one that nobody else had thought of clearly enough to build, meets the brutal testing ground of real warfare repeatedly across half a century and keeps proving that the original insight was correct. Mikhail Mill's insight was that the separation of fire support and troop transport into distinct helicopter types was not a tactical necessity, but an assumption driven by the limits of 1960s design capability. When those limits were transcended by the development of sufficiently powerful turboshaft engines and sufficiently robust structural engineering, the intelligent response was to combine the functions into a single platform that could provide its own fire support while inserting and extracting the troops it was supporting. That insight has never been decisively refuted by any combat experience in 50 years of operational use. The Mi-24 has been defeated by specific weapon systems, the Stinger being the clearest example. It has been found wanting by specific operational requirements, night vision and standoff engagement being the most significant, but no conflict in which it has been employed has produced evidence that the fundamental concept of a combined attack and transport helicopter is tactically unsound. The Mi-24 tells us something important about military technology that goes beyond rotary wing aviation. It tells us that the most enduringly effective weapon systems are those built around genuinely original ideas about what the weapon should do and how it should do it, rather than incremental improvements to existing concepts. The idea of the flying infantry fighting vehicle was genuinely original. Every major feature of the Mi-24's design, its size, its speed, its armor, its weapons diversity, its transport capability, flows logically from that original idea. The coherence between concept and execution is what makes it a machine that still makes sense in 2026 in ways that many of its more expensive and technologically sophisticated contemporaries do not. The Hind is not going anywhere soon. 52 operators, nearly 3,000 examples built, 5 decades of combat experience across every inhabited continent, and a price point that makes it accessible to any military force with serious operational requirements and realistic budget constraints, all ensure that the flying tank will continue to patrol the skies of conflict zones for at least another generation. When the next war starts in a place nobody expects, on terrain nobody has prepared for, against an opponent who doesn't fight by the expected rules, somewhere out there a pair of Mi-24s is going to appear over a ridgeline. And the people on the receiving end are going to understand immediately why those Afghan fighters called it Satan's Chariot. Now, here is the question I want you to answer in the comments, because this debate genuinely matters. The Mi-24 is the only attack helicopter in history that combines serious firepower with meaningful troop transport capability, and no Western nation has ever built a direct equivalent. Do you think that represents a genuine strategic gap in Western air assault doctrine? Or does the separate specialization of attack and lift helicopters actually produce better operational outcomes despite the coordination burden? Put your most detailed argument below. If this kind of deep, uncompromising analysis of the machines and doctrines that shape the modern world is why you are here, hit the like button, because it tells the algorithm that this content deserves to reach the audience that will appreciate it most. Subscribe and activate notifications because this series has a long way still to go. We will see you at the next one.